The night was eerily quiet as Lucas walked past the abandoned warehouse. A distant creak made him pause, his heart pounding. Shadows shifted under the pale moonlight, but there was no one in sight. Suddenly, a faint whisper tickled his ears, too soft to make out the words, yet impossible to ignore. Lucas gripped his flashlight tightly and turned toward the sound, only to see the heavy metal door slowly swinging open. A chilling gust of wind pushed it wider. His breath hitched. Beyond the door, the darkness seemed alive, waiting. Who or what was inside? What do you think happens next? Jonathan Hayes was a man who had everything. A mansion on the hill, shiny sports cars, and a company that made him millions. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. Jonathan was sick. A doctor had told him he only had a few months left to live. For the first time in his life, Jonathan felt lonely. He had spent so many years building his empire that he never made time for friends or family. Now, with nothing but silence in his grand house, he realized how empty his life truly was. One cold evening, as Jonathan walked through the park, wrapped in his expensive coat, he noticed a small figure huddled under a tree. It was a woman shivering as she held a little boy close to her. They were covered with a thin blanket that wasn't enough to protect them from the biting wind. Jonathan stopped, something stirring inside him. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you need help?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were weary, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. "We're fine," she replied quickly, pulling the boy closer. Her son, no more than 6 years old, peeked out from the blanket with wide, curious eyes. "You don't look fine," Jonathan said gently. "Do you have somewhere warm to go?" The woman hesitated before shaking her head. "No, not really," she admitted. "We've been trying to get by, but it's been hard." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. Here he was, a man with more money than he could ever spend, and yet this mother and child didn't even have a roof over their heads. "Come with me," he said. "I'll get you something to eat and a warm place to stay." The woman stared at him, unsure whether to trust him. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Jonathan looked at the boy and then back at her. "Because I can," he said simply. Reluctantly, the woman nodded, and they followed Jonathan to his car. He took them to a nearby diner, where they ate as if they hadn't seen food in days. The boy's name was Sammy, and he was full of questions, asking Jonathan about his fancy suit and shiny shoes. Jonathan couldn't help but smile at the boy's innocence. As they finished their meal, the woman, who introduced herself as Grace, looked at Jonathan with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what we would have done without you tonight." "It's nothing," Jonathan replied, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a chance to make a real difference. After the meal, Jonathan drove Grace and Sammy to a small but comfortable hotel. He paid for their stay and told the receptionist to make sure they had everything they needed. Grace was hesitant at first, but eventually thanked him again. She promised to repay his kindness someday, though she wasn't sure how. The next morning, as Jonathan arrived at the hotel to check on them, he brought breakfast and a few essentials: warm clothes, toys for Sammy, and a notebook for Grace, who had mentioned her dream of writing children's stories. Sammy ran to Jonathan the moment he entered the room, proudly showing off a drawing he had made with the crayons Jonathan had brought. "It's you, Mr. Jonathan!" Sammy exclaimed, holding up the paper. It was a stick figure wearing a suit with a big smile, standing next to another stick figure with curly hair that was clearly Grace. Sammy had drawn himself too, holding their hands. Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. "That's amazing, Sammy," he said, smiling. "You're a talented artist." Grace chuckled softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "He's been drawing all morning. You've inspired him." Jonathan glanced at her, her eyes filled with gratitude but still carrying the weight of her struggles. "I want to help more," he said suddenly, surprising even himself. "You shouldn't have to live in the streets, especially not with Sammy. I can't change everything, but I can try to make things better." Grace looked at him, unsure how to respond. "You've already done so much. Why are you doing this for us?" Jonathan hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I don't have much time left," he admitted, his voice low. "And I want to do something that matters." Grace's eyes widened, her expression softening with understanding. She placed a hand on Sammy's head, as if to protect him from the weight of Jonathan's words. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Jonathan shook his head. "Don't be. Meeting you and Sammy, it's reminded me of what's important. If I can help you get back on your feet, then maybe I can leave something good behind." Grace nodded, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Then we'll make sure your kindness isn't wasted." Jonathan spent the next few weeks helping Grace and Sammy. He found a small apartment for them in a safer neighborhood, paid the rent for the first few months, and even arranged for Grace to meet with a counselor who could help her find work. Grace was hesitant to accept so much, but Jonathan insisted. "This isn't just for you," he told her one evening. "It's for Sammy. He deserves a stable, happy life." As Grace started to rebuild her life, Sammy remained the bright light in their world. He would run to greet Jonathan whenever he came by, always showing him new drawings or sharing funny stories. Sammy seemed to bring out a softer side of Jonathan, one that had been buried under years of business deals and cold meetings. But as the days passed, Jonathan's health began to decline. He didn't tell Grace or Sammy, not wanting to burden them with the news. Instead, he focused on making sure they were set for the future. He secretly set up a trust fund for Sammy, ensuring the boy would have money to go to school and follow his dreams someday. One evening, as Jonathan was sitting with Grace and Sammy in their apartment, Sammy climbed onto his lap, holding a new drawing. This one showed Jonathan standing in the middle of a sunny park, surrounded by smiling faces. Grace, Sammy, and even a few strangers. Above them, Sammy had written in big, colorful letters, "Thank you, Mr. Jonathan." Jonathan felt his throat tighten as he stared at the drawing. "Thank you, Sammy," he said quietly, giving the boy a hug. "It means the world to me." Grace watched them, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done so much for us, Jonathan. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Jonathan smiled faintly, though his body felt weaker than ever. "You already have," he said. "Just seeing you and Sammy happy, that's all I need." As the days passed, Jonathan's health continued to worsen, though he never let it show when he visited Grace and Sammy. He would arrive with small gifts, helping Sammy learn to read and write, while Grace worked on polishing her children's stories. Jonathan felt joy in watching them thrive, even as his body grew weaker with each passing day. One evening, as Jonathan sat on the couch in their apartment, Sammy climbed onto his lap, clutching a tattered book. "Mr. Jonathan, can you read me this story?" he asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Jonathan smiled and opened the book, but his hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Grace noticed and frowned, sitting beside him. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," Jonathan said quickly, not wanting to worry her. He began reading the story aloud, his voice steady despite his fatigue. Sammy listened intently, his head resting on Jonathan's arm. As the story ended, Sammy looked up at Jonathan and asked, "Will you always come to see us, Mr. Jonathan?" Jonathan hesitated, his heart aching at the question. "As long as I can, Sammy," he said gently. Grace studied him closely, her expression serious. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "are you hiding something?" Jonathan took a deep breath, realizing he couldn't keep the truth from them any longer. "I don't have much time left," he admitted, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "The doctors said I'm terminal. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to upset you." Sammy's eyes widened, and he clung to Jonathan tightly. "No, Mr. Jonathan," he cried. "You can't go away." Grace's face fell, her hands trembling as she held Sammy close. "Jonathan," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, "why didn't you tell us sooner?" "I didn't want pity," Jonathan explained. "I wanted to spend the time I have left doing something meaningful. Helping you and Sammy, it's given me peace. I don't regret it." Grace wiped her tears and nodded, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "Then let us help you too," she said firmly. "You've done so much for us, Jonathan. Let us be here for you now." Jonathan smiled faintly, grateful for their kindness. As Sammy hugged him tightly, Jonathan realized that, even in the face of his illness, he had found a family he never knew he needed. From that day onward, Grace and Sammy made it their mission to bring joy to Jonathan's remaining days. Grace cooked meals for him, even though Jonathan protested, claiming he didn't need special treatment. Sammy often visited his grand mansion, brightening every room with his laughter and filling the halls with his colorful drawings. One evening, Grace invited Jonathan over for dinner in their small apartment. It was cozy with a delicious smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Jonathan looked around at the warm, lively space, so different from the cold emptiness of his mansion. As they sat at the table, sharing stories and laughter, Jonathan realized he wasn't just helping them anymore. They were helping him too. After dinner, Sammy tugged on Jonathan's sleeve. "Mr. Jonathan, can I show you something?" he asked eagerly. "Of course, Sammy," Jonathan replied, following the boy to the small table near the window. Sammy picked up a large piece of paper where he had been working on a drawing. This one showed a group of people holding hands under a glowing sun. Sammy pointed at each figure, naming them. "This is me, Mommy, you, and some other friends," he explained. "I want everyone to be happy together." Jonathan smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "That's a beautiful thought, Sammy. Never lose that kindness." But as the days went on, Jonathan's health began to worsen visibly. Grace noticed how he walked slower and spoke softer. She decided to confront him about it one evening. "Jonathan, have you been seeing your doctor?" she asked gently. Jonathan hesitated, then sighed. "I have," he admitted. "There's nothing more they can do." Grace felt tears sting her eyes but didn't let them fall. "Then let us be here for you, the way you've been here for us." Jonathan nodded, grateful for their support. He didn't want to admit it, but he was scared. Yet every moment with Grace and Sammy felt like a gift, a reminder of the beauty he had missed during his years chasing wealth. One morning, as Jonathan sat on a park bench with Sammy drawing beside him, an idea came to him. "Sammy," he said thoughtfully, "how would you feel about helping me with something special?" Sammy looked up with wide eyes. "What is it?" Jonathan smiled. "Let's make a place where people like your mom and you can find help. A place where no one has to sleep outside or feel alone. What do you think?" Sammy's face lit up. That's a great idea. Can I help? Jonathan nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they began to dream up plans for something that would last far beyond Jonathan's time, something that could truly change lives. Jonathan's idea became a spark that set everything into motion. With Sammy's excitement and Grace's support, the plan started to take shape. Jonathan used the last of his wealth to purchase a piece of land near the park, a place where families often gathered. His vision was clear, a community center that offered shelter, food, and education to those in need. Grace threw herself into the project, helping Jonathan design the center and reaching out to local organizations for support. Sammy, too young to handle the serious tasks, became the cheerful mascot of their mission. He would sit by Jonathan's side during meetings, scribbling colorful drawings of what he imagined the center would look like. A big building with smiling faces, playgrounds, and a garden filled with flowers. Jonathan's health continued to decline, but he found purpose in the work. Every time he saw Grace and Sammy smiling or heard the stories of people who wanted to help, he felt like he was leaving behind something greater than himself. One sunny afternoon, as the construction of the center began, Jonathan sat on a bench near the site with Sammy. The boy was busy drawing again, this time sketching the workers and the trucks hauling materials. Jonathan watched him, a peaceful smile on his face. "You know, Sammy," Jonathan said, his voice soft but steady, "this place is going to be yours someday. You'll make sure it helps people, won't you?" Sammy looked up from his drawing, his eyes serious and full of determination. "I promise, Mr. Jonathan, I'll make it the happiest place ever." Jonathan chuckled and ruffled Sammy's hair. "I believe you." Meanwhile, Grace had her first big breakthrough. Her children's stories, written during quiet moments in her apartment, were picked up by a local publisher. The books, inspired by her and Sammy's struggles, were filled with lessons about kindness, resilience, and hope. Grace's work quickly gained attention, and the income from her books allowed her to contribute financially to the community center, further fueling their dream. The day the center opened was bittersweet. Jonathan, too weak to stand for long, sat in a chair near the entrance, watching as families and individuals stepped inside for the first time. Grace and Sammy stayed close to him, their gratitude shining in their eyes. Sammy tugged on Jonathan's sleeve and held up his newest drawing. Jonathan, standing proudly in front of the community center, surrounded by smiling people. Above the building, Sammy had written in big, colorful letters, "Jonathan's Place." Jonathan's eyes welled with tears. "Jonathan's Place," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. "I like that." The opening of Jonathan's Place marked a turning point in the lives of many. Families found hope, children discovered joy, and those who had once felt forgotten were embraced by the kindness of strangers. Jonathan, sitting quietly near the entrance, watched as Grace welcomed guests with a smile, and Sammy ran around, showing off the building to anyone who would listen. His heart swelled with pride, knowing that his final efforts had created something meaningful. That evening, as the sun set and the center quieted, Grace and Sammy sat with Jonathan on a bench outside. The air was cool, and the sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink. Sammy rested his head on Jonathan's shoulder, holding his hand tightly. "You've made the world a better place, Jonathan," Grace said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. Jonathan smiled weakly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I didn't do it alone," he murmured. "You and Sammy, you reminded me of what truly matters. I couldn't have done this without you." As the stars began to appear, Jonathan felt a deep sense of peace. He had spent so much of his life chasing wealth, but in his final days he had discovered the true value of love, connection, and giving back. And when Jonathan's time came, he passed away surrounded by the family he had chosen, Grace, Sammy, and the community he had helped create. His legacy lived on in Jonathan's place, a beacon of hope that continued to change lives, one person at a time. Grace often shared Jonathan's story with visitors, teaching them about the man who had given so selflessly. And Sammy grew up to fulfill his promise, becoming the heart and soul of the center, ensuring that Jonathan's dream endured for generations to come. Thank you for letting me tell this story. It's been a meaningful journey. If you'd like, we can create another story together. Let me know.